I did a talk after your talk, long after everyone left, at our little internal event yesterday. Did your talk go well?
You watched it, didn't you?
No, I was asleep.
Wait, I thought what? You were talking before my talk. Actually, my talk was just 10 minutes in Scott's talk.
Yeah. So I had to back clean up.
Yeah.
So like they put me at the end to try to get people to stay, and so I talked to an empty room. But
Was it really empty?
no, it was cool. Everyone was there. It's such good energy.
Yeah.
It was a really fun event. People were vibing.
That's my favorite event.
Yeah.
What used to be Tech Ready. But
Yeah, it was really cool. So this, for context, friends, there's big companies have internal conferences. Like if you work at Walmart, there might be 5,000 engineers at Walmart, and there's a whole Walmart conference that's happening you don't know about. It's as big as any tech conference you've ever been to. So Microsoft has internal conferences, and we got to speak at one. It used to be called Tech Ready. It's kind of our internal Microsoft build. And I talked about how we should be thinking about AI in the larger system.
let's do system thinking. But here's my thing on system thinking, Scott. I don't even know what that is.
Let's have that conversation, because I think you do.
Okay.
And we're already recording, so now we've already started the show.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mark, I did an episode years ago. It's to this day, it's like my most popular Hanselman episode. And I had a systems architect who owns a company. She's quite well known in the DMV. Her name is Keisha Rogers. She's had a number of startups.
She's known in DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles,
in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, like government, like that area, East Coast. Anyway,
Yeah.
Keisha has a company. She's done a number of startups, but anyway, she's been in business for 30 years, like us. And this was during the peak time of the learn to code movement, and everyone was like, "Kids should learn to code." So we were all running around teaching kids how to do for loops. And she says that we're spending too much time teaching kids to code and not teaching them about the system in which some code might exist. And we expanded that idea beyond just like writing a for loop and running it, like full stack, like learn about the silicon, and to how do we operate as humans within a system? Why is the system set up that way? So, for example, if somebody today, a young person, goes to Amazon, buys some piece of, plastic Chinese crap, it appears at their door the next day. Her argument is that no one thinks about the system within which created that. The oil that was, came from dinosaur bones, that went into the freighter that came across from China, the people who worked there, the macroeconomics of it. Like, systems are big and complex, and we are abstracting away so much. She thinks that's a problem, and people need to learn systems rather than grinding leet code. So that's the controversial topic of the day.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't know if it's controversial. I mean, if you take a look at how AI is doing so much coding, like the value is systems thinking on top of it.
So you do agree? This is great. So
yeah, I do agree. I just wasn't sure. Like, okay, I mean, I think
you're like, what's this dumb topic, Hanselman?
Exactly. What do you got this time?
Yeah, you got to use it for every episode, though.
No, I mean, systems thinking by itself, just interpreted as words, I could understand means architecture. Yeah, I think of it as like architectural thinking as well.
Yeah. I was going to tease you because I was like, Mark, you have to think about the system in which the word system thinking exists. Sorry.
Okay.
But yeah, like, okay, architectural systems, but larger human systems, just like interpersonal relationships is a system. But people keep showing up to work at Microsoft and big tech, and they know how to grind out algorithms on leet code.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of leet code yourself, Mark?
I leet code. That's the only thing I do is leet code.
Grind.
When I code, it's leet code, whatever that is. I think because I do. I think because I am the definition of leet code.
Exactly.
So,
right. You're like, it's like all those Chuck Norris jokes. So like back in the day, when Mark codes, it is leet code by definition because he's coding.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find a difference in the way you're interacting with, like, is it a generational thing? Is it where people went to school? Is it how they approach problems? Like, some people just pick up that idea of like, oh yeah, I see how this fits in. I see how the system puts together, while other people are blinders on. These are the 10 lines of code that they can see.
I don't think it's we talked about this earlier in one of our earlier episodes when we were talking about architecture.
Mhm.
And focusing on going deeper and broader than
Yeah,
what you're just
going
working
one
on.
layer below
It's
your
kind of
comfort.
like I don't think it's generational. I don't see at least it hasn't been visible to me. There might be something generational, but I think it's just the way that humans sort themselves. And it might be based off of what their personal preferences. It also
Mhm.
might, I just like to, come to work and have somebody tell me go do the XYZ, and I'll just
Yep.
do XYZ, and I do a
Yep.
good job of XYZ, and that makes me happy and I feel productive. And there's people that go and like XYZ, why am I doing XYZ?
Yeah.
How does it fit
Question
in? Should I
everything.
be doing XYZ? And, you know, what's the point of XYZ? And
Yeah.
so there's people like that.
I thought I started doing better at Microsoft when I started thinking about where I fit into the system, where I started thinking about what are my boss's goals? What is like, why are we writing this software type thing?
Yeah.
Before I might just write a component and then, okay, here's the component.
So
But then when I thought about the larger
you're that
function,
like, why am I doing XYZ person?
I think almost to a fault.
Yeah.
I almost do it too much. Like I get
Where
into
you're like, I
analysis
don't want to do
paralysis.
XYZ. I'm not doing it.
Well, one of the things that I really admire about you and about Yanan, who helps us with writing some code, is there's a little bit of analysis and then there's coding and then you pause and there's analysis. There's not a big upfront analysis. And I've never seen you get analysis paralysis because there's 10, 25 ways to do something.
Yeah.
But you guys just pick one and you run in that direction while I go, there's 9 ways to do this. And then I get stuck.
Yeah.
I want to act more boldly, but my systems thinking goes like too deep and I get stuck.
Yeah. Interesting. I hadn't really thought about how I approach problems or tasks
Hmm.
that way, but I think you're right, and I'm connecting it with the fact that I just want to get it done, and I want to get it done in whatever the fastest way is possible, but make sure that it's done right as at the same time. So,
Yeah.
like going into something without thinking about it at least a little, you're likely to just waste your time
Right.
because you're going to do something and at the end go, wait a minute. Oh, I forgot to consider these things. And what I
Yeah.
just did, I have to throw away and start over. But at the same time, if you're thinking about it, if you're trying to think about everything, then like you said, you're just
Yeah.
stuck and never do it.
I'll give you an example of a stupid thing that I did last week that probably took longer than it needed to, but it might be an interesting way to kick part of this conversation off. So my 17-year-old is trying to build up some mystery for some pep rally thing at work. See, look at my
Yeah.
brain at school, and he says, I want a website where people go in and it's got like matrix letters and it's mysterious and it's like computery, like Mr. Robot, and there's like a mysterious countdown, and he's like, everyone in the school will see the mysterious countdown and be excited about it. It'll like run around. And then when the countdown goes to 0, it'll switch and it'll have like 7 text boxes like Wordle, and they have to enter in a code. And then if the code is wrong, it'll shake. And then if it's not wrong, it'll go to a page. And then they show that page to the principal and they get a prize or something like that. I'm like, okay, that's a cool like dad son project we can work on.
Mhm.
And then I joined the JavaScript ecosystem, and it's like, you can use npm run dev and Zeit and in Vercel 0 and just like, and I'm like, there's 50 freaking ways to do this. I'm like, is that problem that he described a problem that is going to require any node modules at all, or should it?
Yeah.
So I just ended up doing it in straight JavaScript, index.html, all inline JavaScript. There's not even a script.js, and some CSS, but I'm like racked with systems thinking brain. Like, is that how the people are doing it today?
Yeah. I just thinking about my own experiences when given a task. And I'll take sysinternals tools because a lot of people are familiar with them, and we've talked about Zoomit and how I approach making a new tool or adding a feature to an existing tool. I just think in broad strokes. I need like adding recording to Zoomit or adding something that we did together with Zoom it, like being able to type left instead of right. I just think about the rough structure of what might work, and then I just start. And sometimes that structure, as I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I needed this other function that does this. Oh, this doesn't integrate nicely with the existing way that the code's architected. I need to change it. But it's always an iterative. I think of coding as somewhat like sculpting, because you start with this kind of big, the overall shape of what you're going for. But then as you get into it, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I need to chisel a little more here, chisel there. And what emerges is the sculpture that you're looking for. But it's hard to predict ahead of time exactly where all the chisel hits are going to go.
Yeah. And I also think that a lot of people come into what they call brownfield projects, right? Not greenfield, where it's like I just went and made my new index.html, but brownfield was like I've just showed up at a company that's got 10, 20 years of technical baggage. Like even if you were hired today to work on Windows.
Well, actually, sysinternals is technical baggage.
Actually, that's a good point. How it's been 25 years, right?
It'll be 30 years next year.
God. Yeah. So if you show up and you're the person that's got to add a feature to Zoom it, arguably you should sculpt it in the style of the previous sculptor so that you don't mess it up.
Yeah.
And seeing that is also a thing, like entering the code base and going, okay, I empathize for this person.
Yeah, the philosophy, what they were thinking, the structure, the organization, and not just bolting things on in the way that you would like, because then that makes the whole thing unstable and hard to understand.
But are we entering a time where the systems are too big to understand? Because I'm always advocating
for sure. For sure.
Okay, so you just give up? Like, when do you stop?
You try to understand as much as you think you need to understand.
Mm.
I think that's a trick too, like knowing where enough is enough. And this applies to everything, actually, not just coding, but anything that you're dealing with. When I get docs, when I get presentations, I spend a lot of my time in meetings as the senior exec that is reviewing things and making calls on things. And there's, we've talked about this before. I'm not the expert on everything. There's people at most things I am, not everything. But there's people always there that are presenting and they deeply know it. And I don't know it. There's no way. Like if I wanted to say, I want to know this as deeply as you do, like that's a full-time job. So I can't. So the question is, how much do I need to know to make a decision or have an opinion?
Oh, that's system thinking right there. Yeah. Like, how does this thing that you, subject matter expert who I trust, affect the larger system for which the subject matter expert may not have the larger context?
Exactly. And so I'm sure that you do this, is information will be presented to you and you kind of fill in a picture and you look for, based on your experience, where are the risk areas or where are the areas of concern that might factor into a bigger systems view of what we should do or not do. And then there's gaps in the information, then you start to ask questions. Right.
And the larger these systems get, the more the things that I'm thinking about as the systems thinker in the room is there going to be a ripple as we throw the pebble into the pool that's going to cause us a problem and an untenable, intractable problem at some point down the road.
Yeah.
Like I'm assuming you're not like changing stuff in Azure that could destabilize the system and cause problems. Like the goal is to always make it more stable, more reliable.
Yep. And that's for sure a consideration when you're talking about re-architecting parts of Azure that we're doing is how does this new part merge with the old part? It's the standard changing the plane while you're flying it problem that you got with a system like this.
How do you communicate the size of a system? Is it documentation or are you still doing UML or, nobody's opened Visio in a while.
No. And actually, I was talking to Scott Guthrie yesterday and he's like,
yeah, I saw him too.
He goes, somebody asked me, who has Azure in their head? And
who's still at the company?
No, nobody's.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Like too big.
Even people that weren't here They might have had Azure in their head at the very beginning. And I knew a lot more about Azure 10 years ago or 15
Well,
years.
yeah, we did our history show, like when
Yeah.
it was like Red Dog and it was
Yeah.
like stateless VMs. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
then.
I knew the level of depth I had was and coverage I had of Azure
Mm.
was much higher percentage than it is now, just because it's gotten so massive and so sprawling. There's so many services, and internal and external, that I can't. And there's nobody at the company that knows Azure in their head. This is one of those things about systems thinking. Like I think the knowledge of the abstractions necessary for me to be effective.
Where do we fit into it as humans? Ethical, philosophical. Like we had some really interesting conversations about what it means to be applying AI into tech right now, and I keep coming back to the tension with the young people learning leap code. Like where did little technical puzzles become more interesting to me than the larger
Well,
business problem?
haven't they always been? I mean, Microsoft's famous for the interview question, reverse the linked list.
Microsoft, what's that one question about, like, why are manhole covers round?
Yeah, that's the other one.
Like we have done that forever.
Yeah.
Why do we do that? Is that just a human thing?
I think that we don't know a lot of people don't know a good way of measuring somebody's skill or capabilities. So
Ooh,
it's just like, let's fall back on
deep.
the easy thing. Like, if they can't reverse the linked list, that must mean something about their skills or capabilities. And in
See,
fact, that kind of program in front of me,
yeah,
I never liked that. I had to do that, by the way, at New Mega Technologies. I
you
remember
had to.
this.
You were required
So they
as
would
part
do,
of the.
yes, yeah, it was part of their interview. So I went to New Mega Technologies in 1996 or 5, to work on potentially Soft Ice, the kernel debugger.
Soft ice.
And
Soft ice mentioned.
so because that's low level assembly code, so the problem was write this function or write this program, small program to do something, and I can't remember what it was, in assembly. And we're going to sit and watch you do it. So,
Oh God,
yeah.
that's the worst.
Yeah.
That is the worst.
Yeah. So it was fun. I mean, I did it and crushed it. I leap coded it, but it was that I hate that kind of pressure of, because then you feel like it shouldn't matter how I do it. My process shouldn't matter.
Yeah,
The outcome should matter.
I appreciate that you acknowledge that, because people in the comments will appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey man, I might have to Google, I might have to Stack Overflow, I might have to go for a walk, I might
Yeah.
have to eat a box of candy.
Exactly.
Everybody's got their own process, and that's okay.
Yeah.
How many Diet Cokes is it going to take for Hanselman to get this thing written? A lot. So good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
that's important. More important than ever, the process. It's just trusting the process. So this, go to the whiteboard and reverse the linked list. Like, that's just crap. It's garbage. Like, it's forcing somebody into something that's not relevant to the job. When you tell me, how many times do you feel like, hey, I need to write this code. I'm going to go to the whiteboard
Straight to the whiteboard.
and write out the algorithm first.
Constantly.
Yeah.
This is not a thing.
Yeah.
But this is where the AI coding stuff becomes really interesting to me. I'm not sure if we've done a show on this or not, but I think you sent me a document. We were talking about the rise of the expert beginner. You thought about this? There's some articles have been going around about how AI coding,
Yeah.
if used incorrectly, can create expert beginners. So
If you
people
incorrectly?
Yeah, if you apply AI coding incorrectly, if you basically if I went and I taught, there's a question around this.
Yeah.
My kids don't code. Okay, they're just not interested in tech. One plays football, one's an artist. That's great. But when we went and we made that website for my 17-year-old, we used Copilot, and it saved us a ton of time. It was spicy autocomplete, and we got that thing done in like half an hour. He didn't understand it. So then the question is, does it matter? Well, in this case, it doesn't matter because the site worked.
Yeah.
And his goal was, as a business person, make the site work. I spent time later making sure I understood the JavaScript because I just couldn't not. But then now he's an expert beginner. He's like, oh, coding's easy. I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to bang out website, and it's just like, it's going to be easy until it's not easy.
I've got strong opinions on this one.
Yeah. So he's an expert beginner now.
Yeah. So those coding systems like Devon and Replit, where you're like, hey, go make this website that does these 5 things. And
yeah, Bolt is another.
Yeah. And then it starts and thinks about it and comes with the plans. You want me to add these things and goes off. And, an hour later, it's like, here you go. And you look at it and it doesn't quite do what you want. So here's the problem. And I think why, at least I see no line of sight into AI completely replacing programmers. No line of sight.
That's a hot take. That's a spicy take right there.
And I'll tell you, and there's a few reasons for it. One of them is when these systems hallucinate, just inherently they hallucinate. And so how do you know that the code that they're creating is correct? Well, they can write unit tests for it, but they can't write unit tests for this full spec of what you imagine you want it to be like.
Right. They can only guess what you want.
So speaking of systems thinking, when you sit down, like, hey, I'm going to make a website that shows a map of the United States, and you can drill in and it'll show you counties and it'll pull data from the government's engineering usage statistics. And so you can go look at county by county, how much energy do they use over years and what sources of energy are consumed.
I love that I'm architecting this in my head as you're describing it. Like, yeah.
So, what you would do, like you would have the spec for that in your head.
Yep,
would you sit down and spend 2 hours writing down exactly, when they click on this is what happens. When they click on that, that's what happens.
No, I would probably, for me, I'd write 10 user stories, probably on like a notebook or like in Notepad. And I just start banging the user stories out by, broad strokes to detailed stuff. Not a lot there, maybe 10 minutes of typing.
Yeah. And that I would just write bullets for what I want and then start coding. Like first, I need a thing to show a map. I need to show the map needs to have this concept of states. That needs to be in the code, and I need to be able to click and know.
Bob Ross.
Yeah,
just happy little maps.
So let's say that you wanted to use AI, one of these AI coding platforms, to do that. You go and tell it what you want. You probably haven't fully specified it. Even when you go write it down, you haven't fully specified it.
No.
And so the system goes and creates something, and it misunderstood something, or it missed something, or it has a bug somewhere. And so it doesn't do what you want. And so at this point, what are you left with? You're left with, hey, you didn't do this right. Go fix this. And I'll tell you, the model might not understand that. The code has gotten complicated. And so when it fixes one thing, it breaks another thing. And at that point, what are you left with? It's like, you go through a few iterations, and the AI, you can't quite get the AI platform to fully fix what you're going for, fully implement it. So now you own a piece of code that you didn't write any of, and and at this point, if you don't know how to code, you're completely dead in the water. If you do know how to code, you now have a brownfield application you need to take over.
That literally happened when we were writing this thing. He said he wanted like matrix rain coming down, and he asked for green matrix rain, but the AI did it in red and did it with ones and zeros rather than the matrix quasi Asian characters, and he didn't know how to get it to go back, so he just gave up and he just went with theirs. He's like, it's fine. So we started inheriting technical debt from the thing, and it did not turn out how we envisioned. It turned out like a parallel universe Spider-Verse version of what we imagined, and it was fine, but it was definitely not what he envisioned.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example.
It was two steps forward, one step back.
And I think that this is just inherent. And the risk here is that you have the system, you invest a lot of time, it's built this big thing, and then you need to change it, or you need to deliver this project, and it's not able to. And now you're forced with, inheriting the brownfield. Like, let's say that, hey, you were delivering this to somebody that had actually contracted it or paying him to create it, and you're stuck at the red, and it's like, no, I think it's okay, but that's not what I'm being paid for. I need to fix it. And at that point, you could take over the code and be like, okay, what's the AI trying to do? Where's the flaw? Let me fix it. He's
Yeah.
dead. Like he's like,
Yeah.
oh, fail.
Let me
Like,
give you another one. We asked it to do the matrix rain, and it generated 256 spans, like hard coded with ones and zeros in them, and then named them span 1, span 2, span 3. And then it used JavaScript to manipulate the DOM to move these spans around, and it was like heating up my laptop, and it would not run on mobile at all. So then I had to step in because the 17-year-old was doing it. And I was like, do this programmatically without creating it more than 2 spans or something like that. And it was like, what were you trained on that you thought that was a good idea? It just went off running. It was crazy.
So that's one reason. And the risk here, like even the risk is somebody that's the expert beginner is dead. Like they can't deliver the project that they want. They just even for the experienced programmer like you, now you might have to spend 2 hours to understand the code so that you can fix it. And if you just sat down, there's some trade-off somewhere. If you just sat down and had AI guide you or help you code as you coded it, you might be done faster than having the AI go try to spit out the whole thing and then you take it over and try to learn it and then fix it.
I ended up being an expert BS detector because I was basically, the AI was doing a great job, and then it started to generate some BS, and I was like, how much BS can I tolerate?
Yeah.
Like I was like, I'm fine with that hack, but then it started to get weird, and then the spans showed up, and I was like, no, this is unacceptable. This is officially not where we need to be. And then getting that to undo was messy. You're right. If I had simply had it like over my shoulder, going, hey, like a partner, which is where we get into that conversation about the Socratic method and brainstorming with an AI, because you're really just talking to yourself in the mirror, is sometimes a better way than just asking it to make something. So you do use Copilot though to generate things.
I generate 95% of the code.
Like you're not a hater.
No. To be clear, and we've talked about this before. When I do these AI research projects, which is a bulk of my programming now, 95% of it is AI generated or more. It doesn't always get it right, and sometimes I need to step in and fix things. Sometimes I write a little piece of code here and there where it's just more convenient than asking the AI and giving it the spec, basically. I can just do it myself really quickly. But it writes most of it. And I understand the code well enough that when it screws it up, I can take a look and understand, okay, so this is what it thinks I asked for when I didn't. And I need to go back and either correct it or I can fix the code right here because it's simple enough. If I didn't know how to code, I wouldn't be able to be this productive. And I think, just bottom line, that is one reason AI won't kill programming. This problem of specification, detail, and what becomes brownfield code the instant it's created. The other reason that I also think AI programming won't completely take over is if you take so I was having it write some code, and OpenAI's SDKs have changed over time for new models and for new capabilities. And you ask the model to go create some code based off OpenAI's SDK, and it actually generated code using the old version of the API.
And training data is stuck in the past.
It's stuck in the past. And it might even have trained after the new SDK came out, but it's just got more examples of the old code, so it wants to use the old code. So you can tell it use the new code, but it might not know it as deeply because there's not enough examples out there. So the second a new API comes out, AI doesn't know how to use it because it has no examples.
And then you need to go and RAG over new documentation.
But even RAG is not going to teach it. Like, here, tell me, go take Microsoft's documentation for whatever API you want and say, is that good enough? Is that enough for AI to even? It's not enough for human. Like, how many times have you gone to API documentation? And it's not just Microsoft, but lots where it's like, here's the API. It's the REST call. Here are the properties. Property 1, time. This is the time.
People need to build experience. They need to mess around with the thing for a while.
And the documentation is purely just here's the structure and the names of the
Right, because it's generated
yeah,
documentation.
because it's generated. There's like there's nothing about you use this after calling this other API. It takes an object like this, and no context. So an AI is not gonna. A human can't understand it. AI is not
Yeah.
gonna understand it. How to use it. So I think that's another reason why AI can't completely take over programming is it just doesn't know what the current API set is. It doesn't know APIs in general. And there's a few other miscellaneous reasons, but those are two big ones.
Yeah. As we get towards the end, one last thing to think about is environment setup, what I've always called yak shaving.
Yep.
So like I've been doing a lot of Python lately, and the number one issue is not the Python.
Yeah. It's
Python V environments, multiple. I got a Python and user bin. I got another Python and whatever, just share bin. Like, bro, there's pip and there's this and there's that, and then there's wheels.
And then there's like this package is incompatible with that version of that package, but there's this package which isn't compatible with this one, but not that one. And oh crap, none of I can't use all three at the same time.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do all of this on ARM.
Yeah,
and I'm finding with working with Anthony Shaw, we're finding that like, oh, you need to go and compile this native wheel on ARM because no one ever compiled it before. And then it's the left pad problem.
So I think just in conclusion.
Yeah.
AI is a huge accelerant for somebody that's an expert. For somebody that's a beginner, they may be able to do simple projects, but nothing complicated.
So we need to teach the young people, the early in career people, the emerging people. They got to learn systems.
Yeah, and how to program.
Got to learn how to program. All right. Well, if you have made it this far into Mark and Scott Learn, spread the word. Put some reviews wherever you review your podcast. It helps us a lot. Please share these things on LinkedIn. Mark wants to see the numbers go up. If you want to write an AI
and give us comments too.
Yeah, give us comments. Write an AI that just watches the show over and over again to get the numbers up. That would be very helpful. Yes, good tip. Yeah, you can do that. Yes, but yeah, comments. Let us know that you're out there. Otherwise, he'll stop hanging out with me, and then he'll just be like Scott talks to himself, and we don't want that. See you next week. That would be it for one episode. Scott slowly loses his mind as he talks to himself in his office. All right, that's our end right there, friends.